It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, doesn't it? It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
There wasn't a first down. Not that much. The officiating, I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today. That spot, the graphic displays the unfair penalties. The one not called on us on that day clearly was being booked before the ball got there. And the previous penalty they called on Delano Hill, the ball is uncatchable and by the receiver. See, I'm bitterly disappointed. Throw a hat, throw a stick, throw your sideline, that's a penalty.
This is the Silver Bullets Podcast on the Ozone Radio Network, your authority on all things Ohio State. Here are your hosts, Shannon, Sommers, and Chip Minnich.
Not Chip, if you have an iota of human feeling.
Buckeye Nation, welcome to another edition of the Silver Bullets Podcast on the Ozone Radio Network. I'm your host, Shannon Sommers. We're going to be talking about the Ohio State men's basketball, the Ohio State football team. I can speak because we're like changing sports and, this is a basketball town, right? But since we're going to be talking football, I got my man Chip Minnich with me. Chip, how are we doing today?
Doing well, Shannon. Great to be with you.
All right, we got today wrapped up the 8th practice for the Buckeyes of the spring, which means we have 7 more to go, I believe, is it?
It's actually the opposite. It was
today's 7th. Yeah, you're right. I should know that after just getting done doing Acosta Field, and we were talking about it was the 6th practice. So, we've got the 7th one in the books. We have 8 yet to go. The spring game on April 14th, I believe, is the date. And yes. Right now, or when I looked on last weekend when I was at the shoe, the early projections were 67 degrees with a chance of thunderstorms. I haven't updated that. So are you going to be going to the spring game again this year?
Yes, I am. I'm excited. Going to be bringing my twin sons who are, they're 14 years old and a cousin as well. So I always enjoy the spring game. I agree with, I believe it was Tom Orr who said, not to look too much into the spring game, in terms of, or spring football, for anything noteworthy, I think the legend of Bam Childress still reigns strong within Ohio State spring football, and that was, 15 some years ago when Bam Childress had a dynamic spring game and then really was kind of a non-factor in the regular season. But I always enjoy the spring game. First and foremost, because an opportunity to see players who may have redshirted or are early enrollees, that's first, on the list. And the second thing, and I think this is probably near and dear to your heart, Shannon, is, anytime you have an opportunity to be in the shoe watching football, regardless of whether it's the 15th spring practice, it's a great opportunity just to take in Ohio State football and the terrific surroundings.
Yeah, and I like to go there. I work there kind of for the lacrosse right now too, and just being there on Saturday, even though it was kind of chilly, it was very eventful because just something about that place just brings a smile to my face, and I really, really enjoy being there. And for those that might not be aware, but on the west side of the stadium, the little section of the B deck between the suites and the North Rotunda, those are gone. So that they're already starting that, and I believe the C deck is going to be closed on the west side of the stadium this year for the upgrade as far as, the work on the concrete with this, all that kind of stuff like they did on the C deck over there on the east side last year. So the construction's already started there, and there's going to be less seats available for the spring game, but that's not going to matter for Ohio State fans, especially when you have Michigan, you're playing in lacrosse beforehand.
Good to know.
We're talking about the football and a lot of the different things. We know not to look a lot into it. You mentioned the legend of Bam Childress, and was it Nick Collins, I believe, is another one for me. Just a few years ago, he was the star of the spring game, ran off to his prom because he just was graduated or whatever and enrolled at Ohio State. And here we are. He, unfortunately, because of injuries, hasn't been able to do anything, and now he's retired from the game of football. So you can't take a lot from the game, but the one thing that everybody's going to be looking at is the quarterbacks. What's your take on the quarterbacks?
Well, I believe Urban Meyer is definitely trying to keep, if he had his choice, I have no doubt in my mind that Joe Burrow would be staying no matter how it all shakes out. I think that's his choice, but that's not going to happen. If Joe Burrow doesn't win the job, I certainly do not begrudge Joe Burrow from looking around for an opportunity that will present him with the opportunity to play. He's going to graduate at the end of spring with his degree, which makes him eligible to go and play right away as a graduate transfer. I believe that Coach Meyer is being sincere when he says that right now all of them are relatively equal. But I also believe that Dwayne Haskins probably has the edge simply because not only did he play last year where Joe Burrow did not because of the injury that he sustained during fall camp to his throwing hand, but also the fact that Dwayne Haskins, when you're talking the game at the end of November of 2017 in Ann Arbor, Ohio State was down. He came in cold off the bench and was able to play well enough for Ohio State to not only take the lead, but eventually win the game. So I would think Dwayne Haskins probably is the front runner, but I don't want to give anyone the false impression that with message board rumors and this and that. I think they're trying to make it as fair and evenly balanced as possible. But I would have to presume that Dwayne Haskins is the favorite going into, the spring game. And then we'll see what happens at the end of the spring game if Coach Meyer's going to say if he has a starter going into fall camp.
I'm the chairman of the Joe Burrow for Ohio State starting quarterback, correct?
I do know that. That is correct.
I just was, in case other listeners don't know this, and we talked about it on Acosta Field, we were actually talking about the quarterbacks on the latest episode of Acosta Field, which just came out. Well, this is Wednesday we're recording. So when you listen to this a couple days or a day ago, but one of the things that we talked about, and you mentioned about him having a leg up because of basically the playing time because Burrow got hurt, but also what he did in the Michigan game. I mean, to me, because I brought it up to Tony and Tom just when we were talking about it, what about the week before when the Illinois game, when they had to bring the starters back in because he wasn't good at all? Does that make it a wash? So it kind of takes that great what he did against Michigan away, or just because it's Michigan in the game that, it's just a lot better still?
I think the Michigan performance probably elevated him. No disrespect to the poor performance against Illinois, but let's face it. I mean, Ohio State was comfortably ahead. I think Urban Meyer was just trying to send a message about the pursuit of perfection, so to speak, even though Dwayne Haskins didn't perform well in his eyes. The reality is Ohio State was never in danger of losing that game. Against Michigan, they were down, and you just lost your starting quarterback, the heart and soul of the offense, and you had to come in as a redshirt freshman in Ann Arbor and come in. And was he perfect? No, but he did well enough. I wrote an article for the Ozone spring overview, so to speak, some of the different positions, and I included a link to a pass that Dwayne Haskins threw to his roommate, Austin Mack. That was, Austin Mack took a wicked shot, held on to the ball, and then eventually, Ohio State was able to score off that drive. But I just think Dwayne Haskins, I think you make some valid points about the poor performance against Illinois, but I just knowing how important winning the game is to Urban Meyer as well as the program, I think that probably has Dwayne Haskins elevated slightly in the eyes of the coaching staff this spring, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Well, just as a spoiler, because I'm sure you're going to be listening to Acosta Field sometime tomorrow, we did bring up the simple fact that, well, Michigan was just a regular game, and Illinois, they're playing for the Illabuck. So maybe if there's a trophy involved, that stress and that pressure might be getting to Haskins.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, like who would not kind of crumble under the pressure of, trying to maintain possession of the Illabuck?
Exactly.
Many a man has, kind of cracked under that extreme pressure.
Exactly. Now, sticking with the quarterbacks, and I mentioned this to you before we started recording, because when we did Acosta Field, we were talking about how Tate Martell mentioned with Tony and Tom that, hey, they told me that they're going to have some packages for me this next season that I'm going to be seeing in the field. Well, we got to discussing it, and Tom Orr brought up that, hey, if the best scenario for the Ohio State Buckeyes going forward to him is that Dwayne Haskins is a starter and Tate Martell comes in some packages, which will keep the defenses honest. And because you don't know if Tate's going to throw or Tate's going to run. And because Haskins has strong arm, it's a better fit to have Tate with Haskins instead of having Tate with Burrow, he's just like a JT Barrett. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? When we talked about it, and it didn't hit me until I was editing the show, but would that signal that, all right, hey, maybe Haskins is a starter?
I think Tom might be onto something there. That it certainly makes sense because every Ohio State fan would have to acknowledge Urban Meyer, his love of quarterback run game as part of the offense, the zone read, all those things. And it's not to say that Wayne Haskins won't ever do any of that, but let's face it, his mobility is not nearly to the extent of what Ohio State fans have grown accustomed to at the quarterback position while Urban Meyer's been the head coach. You had Braxton Miller, who was kind of like Urban Meyer, probably his ideal player at that position in terms of the mobility and speed and athleticism. JT Barrett, I think I seem to recall Urban Meyer even kind of joking about JT Barrett's lack of foot speed back during the national championship season, against Minnesota, how like that touchdown run seemed to take for forever. But, JT Barrett, he was very, very capable at running. Getting to your question, I think Joe Burrow is not nearly as athletic as JT Barrett, but I think he is more athletic than Dwayne Haskins, if that makes sense, in terms of mobility and agility and things like that. Whereas I think Tate Martell is absolutely superior to both of them. So to Tom's point, I just believe that if that would probably be the best thing, instead of having Joe Burrow, who is more mobile than Dwayne Haskins, has a good arm, but not as great of an arm as Dwayne Haskins. Like he's kind of that perfect in between Haskins and Martell. It might be best for the offense to have the strong arm passing of Dwayne Haskins, and then, maybe during red zone opportunities or short yardage, an absolute dynamic wizard in the open field with Tate Martell, like those packages that have been promised to him. That might be the best thing for the Ohio State offense this coming season.
Now, moving away from the quarterback position, we look at the running backs, and Mike Weber comes back, and you have J.K. Dobbins. So the running back situation, as far as your 1 and 2, that's already settled. You look at your wide receiver, and everybody's come back, and you're hoping players like Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor step up a little bit more, and the guys are able to create separation and be more effective. They seem to be a little bit better last year, but they went and disappeared in stretches for games at a time. The biggest thing on offense besides the quarterback position is going to be the offensive line. We're looking at a whole new retooled offensive line. You're losing Jamarco Jones. You're losing Billy Price. You've got Michael Jordan still, but you're going to be looking at Isaiah Prince, I believe, moving over to left tackle. I think Brady Taylor is attempting to be the center right now, and Knox has been playing for, the right guard spot after, I forget his name.
Brandon Bowen.
Yeah, Brandon Bowen went down, and if he's healthy, those guys could be competing for that right guard spot, and you got the right tackle spot that's going to be open. Maybe one of those guys gets the right tackle spot, but what are you paying attention right now in the spring for the offensive line, or is this something that you're really going to be wanting to hear more about in August instead of April?
No, I'm definitely paying attention. Just to we were talking about the spring game. I distinctly recall in 2014 going to the Ohio State spring game, and at the time, just to refresh the memories of that time, Braxton Miller was coming off of the injury from the Orange Bowl. So he was being withheld because he was still rehabilitating his throwing arm. And that was when Ohio State fans saw Cardale Jones and JT Barrett playing behind a makeshift offensive line that had 4 new starters. And during the spring game, the offensive line did not look well. And then you fast forward into in the 2014 season, and they were able to rally on the road at Annapolis to beat Navy. And then the second week, it all kind of came crashing down against Virginia Tech. So the reason I'm kind of bringing this up is when you fast forward to this year, so you have Isaiah Prince, who has the left tackle position, but it's completely different from the last 2 years when he played right tackle. So there has to be some kind of an adjustment, but I think he has the skills to do it. Michael Jordan at left guard, he's being withheld from spring football because he's rehabbing from shoulder surgery. So that is kind of opening up the opportunity for Malcolm Pridgeon, I believe, to play at that position, at least during the spring. Brady Taylor is the front runner at center, but in my estimation, just kind of watching some of the press conference, Urban Meyer, he was giving praise to Brady Taylor, but by no means did he say that he has clinched the job. And then, when it comes to right guard, I think you said Demetrius Knox, he's probably the front runner at that spot. But we'll see if Brandon Bowen will give him a run for that job in the fall. At right tackle, I'd have to believe Thayer Munford is there. But it is kind of unsettling to not know in terms of, it sounds to me like right now, like the only person that is a definite starter is Isaiah Prince. It seems kind of discombobulated. And I realize it is the spring, as we said, it's we just finished, or I should say the players just finished their 7th practice, but it would be nice coming out of the spring feeling that the offensive line is starting to gel. And I believe the other day, Tom and Tony Girdman were there. Urban Meyer was visually perturbed at poor practice that they had, that a lot of people were kind of attributing to the offensive line not playing too well. So hopefully they'll get it straightened out. To your point, I will probably get more concerned if reports out of practice are bad in August versus April, but it would be nice to see them play well in the spring game on April 14th.
Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. Defensive line, we're losing Sam Hubbard. You're losing Tracy Sprinkle. You're losing Taquan Lewis, Jonathan Cooper, right?
No, Jonathan Cooper's back.
No, yeah, not Cooper.
Jalen Holmes.
Jalen Holmes, yeah. You lose a lot of talent on the defensive line. These guys could be starters at any school in the Big Ten, let alone the country, pretty much. It's a lot of talent they're losing, but you have Nick Bosa, who's still here, Chase Young, who the Predator, and just looking like he's going to have feasting, especially with defensive tackle. Yeah. You got those 3 guys on the defensive line, and you've got some freshmen coming in, and you've got talent there and everything. Are you concerned about anything on the defensive line?
I guess I want to call it concern because kind of, when I wrote about it in my article, like I rank in terms of like the position groups, in terms of like the least concerned to the most concerned. And I had the defensive line as being my least concern simply because, as you said just a moment ago, yeah, they lost a ton of talent, but they've got so much talent not only coming back, but so much talent coming in. I mean, you have Nick Bosa, Chase Young. We talked about Jonathan Cooper. We haven't even talked about the fact that, by and large, the strength of the defensive line, as good as Nick Bosa and Chase Young and Jonathan Cooper, how good of defensive ends that these guys are, they're moving Jayshon Cornell out to defensive end from the interior. What I was going to say is that the strength of the defensive line is actually the interior defensive linemen. You know, when you have guys like Jones coming back and you've got Robert Landers ready to step up, by and large, when it comes to some of the other defensive linemen, Deshaun Hamilton, have been role players that they're going to get their opportunity to now shine. What had me really excited was the other day, I'm sure you saw true freshman Tommy Togiai.
I was going to bring that up.
I mean, and that you're thinking that guy is a true freshman, you know, and so, you know, I just think that the defensive line is going to be, you know, something that good luck. You know, if you want to double team Nick Bosa, be our guest. There will be more than enough players on the Ohio State defensive line who will capitalize upon that decision.
That's going to open up a lot of things for the linebacker core, which is we're going to be a new linebacking core. Tough Borland, right now he's out with an Achilles injury. And if anybody who's a fan of our show remembers a couple of years ago when I ruptured my Achilles at the World Series, that takes a while to get over. And I mean, I'm sure with all the rehab and everything, don't know how severe it is or anything. But your middle linebacker right now, it's penciled in, I believe.
Justin Hilliard.
Yeah, Justin Hilliard, and he's going to be a redshirt freshman.
Or he's actually going to be a sophomore, Baron Browning.
Oh, okay, yeah, he wasn't redshirted last year.
No, he played. He lettered as a freshman.
Okay, so you've got those guys right now penciled in as for the two deep, basically. And Urban Meyer made a comment that, yeah, Tough Borland was penciled in as a starter. But you also have guys like Jones, who, by the way, you're talking about videos and stuff. He had a good fight with Joe Burrow on that tire, but Joe Burrow he fought him pretty good and valiantly. But what are your thoughts on the linebacker situation and, you know, for next year?
Well, I'm concerned about the fact that not only, as you said, you know, 3 new starters. And I have an article coming out on Hayes and Cannon portion of the ozone.net in terms of the overview, looking at the linebackers. Last year, the linebackers did not play well, or at least up to Ohio State standards. I don't know if it was because Bill Davis, that was his first year coaching, and maybe it was just the adjustment from Luke Fickell to Bill Davis. I don't know if it was because players were out of position, because if you recall, last year, the starting linebackers were Chris Worley in the middle, and he was flanked on the outside by Jerome Baker and Dante Booker. And then by the end of the season, you know, that completely changed, where you had Tough Borland in the middle and you had Chris Worley back outside along with Jerome Baker. And so they played better down the stretch. So now the fact that you have Jerome Baker off to the NFL, Tough Borland is out indefinitely, and I can only extend sincere best wishes to him for a speedy recovery. But as Shannon said, you know, that's the kind of injury that, you know, you don't want to rush back from, because, you know, it could possibly cause more damage. So I'm sure they're going to be very cautious with an Achilles injury. You have to figure that Keandre Jones, Malik Harrison, that they will ample opportunities at the outside. And I realized that Justin Hilliard was heavily recruited several years ago. You know, he was a 5-star recruit. He unfortunately has had injury issues, you know, like, you know, torn bicep issues, you know, that have kept him from, you know, being able to play as linebacker. I started gaining opportunities on special teams. The guy that I think he's going to seize the opportunity to win that starting job with Borland out, I think it's going to be Baron Browning. Because Browning is athletic enough to play any of the linebacker positions. So there's going to be some growing pains for the defense, with basically, as you said, 3 new starters at the linebacker position, and one of whom has never had to call the defense before. So we'll see. And I certainly don't want to shortchange Pete Werner, who, as Gerd tweeted last fall, like there was a terrific clip of Pete Werner on special teams when Ohio State was on the road at Rutgers. He threw one of the Rutgers blockers into the Rutgers returner, basically like, okay, well, if I can't get to the returner, I'll just throw throw his man at him to bring him down. So I think the competition is going to be throughout the spring. It surprised me if no starters are named at the linebacker positions until the fall.
One of the areas for me, and I'm a huge fan of, and I'm concerned about, is the secondary and just the secondary with the corners and the safety. I mean, you're penciling in right now Sheffield on one side. I believe Reap might be moving to, Arnett's going to be on the other side. Reap might be, I think he's moving to safety. And you've got just a bunch of different guys trying out for the two safety positions. What are your thoughts on the secondary?
Oh, it's a concern. I think Ohio State fans have kind of grown accustomed to, all right, well, we lose our secondary year after year, and the next year, we have players that are just as good, if not better, come back in, and what's the concern? Well, here's the deal: is that we've kind of grown spoiled with the caliber of talent in the secondary, and oh, by the way, one of the coaches who was instrumental in developing that talent is no longer on the Ohio State sidelines. He's now coaching, in the NFL for the Tennessee Titans. And, I'm talking about Coach Kerry Combs. He left this offseason. So the Ohio State secondary, they've got turnover not only within their ranks, but also within the coaching staff. Now, fortunately, they've got Taver Johnson coming back as an assistant at Ohio State. This is familiar territory. He coached under Jim Tressel and Luke Fickell. Now he's coaching under Urban Meyer. But the players have to get used to a new style of coaching. We haven't even talked about how Alex Grinch, he's helping coach the safeties as co-defensive coordinator. You have Jordan Fuller, he's pretty much a lock at one of the safeties. As you said, Amir Reap is moving to safety. Isaiah Pryor should be one of the front runners at the opposite safety spot from Jordan Fuller, but I'm sure Amir Reap is going to do everything he can to kind of persuade the coaches that he's deserving of that. Jeffrey Okudah's out this spring, another shoulder surgery rehab. Damon Arnett played better down the stretch. Kendall Sheffield played better down the stretch, but it's always a concern because you're talking about the opposing teams that Ohio State's going to be playing, that they're going to be tested by quarterbacks, just to kind of get feel for how good these players really are. That kind of goes back to what we were talking about a few moments ago. What's a tremendous benefit is that phenomenal pass rush that the Buckeyes have should be able to kind of help the secondary as they're gaining more and more experience and confidence with each game.
As far as what's been going on so far from the practices this spring, we haven't been able to get together. I mean, we're doing basketball and stuff like that. So, I mean, do you have anything else as far as your thoughts so far on this spring and the way it's going? 7 practices, not 8.
Yeah, that's what. No, I think so far, it's kind of. I respected Coach Meyer's honesty the other day when he said that he was kind of disappointed that they're not further along. But I also respected the fact that he acknowledged that there's a lot of young talent there. I mean, you've got, we were talking about a lot of first time, like true freshmen that enrolled in January. You're talking about, redshirt freshmen. You're talking about sophomores that finally getting an opportunity to play. So if you're going to withhold players from practice, either by necessity, like the shoulder surgeries, or, just giving them a rest, you're going to see some mistakes. Hopefully the players are learning from their mistakes, and every rep that they get, if they made a mistake on the previous rep, that they correct it on the second or third, and that they get better each time. I think Tony and Tom, they've had the opportunity to see, practice being closer to the action. I think they would be the first ones to admit, even when they're at practice, it's kind of difficult to gauge what they're seeing because they only get to see practice for a short period of time, and they're on the complete opposite end of the practice field. So, yeah, I think it seems like Ohio State football for this stage, almost midway through, that they're kind of where I would expect them to be. Like there's going to be some bumps in the road. There's going to be, some rough patches, but that the young talent is developing. And at least for Urban Meyer to be somewhat disappointed, I'm glad that it's April and not August, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I agree. We just want to point out for our show for next week or, next couple of weeks before the spring game, if any of our listeners, if you have any questions, go ahead and hit us up on Twitter with the hashtag AskSilverBullets. You could email us at silverbulletspodcast@gmail.com. And we'll gladly answer any questions that you guys have or, get the answers for you in order to be able to help everybody know what's going on, getting ready for the spring game and all that. With that being, did you have anything else?
I guess, as we're recording this is, right before the Easter holiday. So sincere wishes to everyone who listens to this. Best wishes for a safe and happy Easter celebration. Some people are traveling, so be safe on the road. But other than that, yeah, it's always great talking Ohio State football. If anything, I look at spring football. This is kind of my oasis, so to speak. I'm not nearly the passionate baseball fan that you, Tom, and Gerd are. So, if anything, my interest in baseball doesn't really pick up until the weather starts to be consistently warmer. So, I think you would agree, up here in northeastern Ohio, it's been, as George Harrison used to say, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, spring football to me is kind of like, okay, like getting a chance to see young talent playing for the Buckeyes is always something that excites me, and then just kind of makes me that much more anxious for September to get here sooner rather than later.
Yeah, next Friday, my Cleveland Indians are opening up in Cleveland, and I will be there. I'll be there Friday. Yeah, it's Friday and Saturday. Got tickets for both of those games. I have to change up my tickets for the 14th because I got somewhere else that I'm going to be.
What I understand. What's just out of curiosity? Because I genuinely don't know.
I have not checked on the weather for the home opener, but I've checked on the weather for the spring game. Figure that one out.
Well, all I know is when it comes to baseball season,
it's Cleveland, and when it's opening day, I'm assuming it's going to be cold. I forget how many years in a row we've been going to the home opener. The first year we went, we had tickets in the bleachers, and the sun was hitting us, so it wasn't that bad. I think I just had like a hoodie on. The next year maybe was the catastrophe, if you will, of standing in line and right before the gates open up, hey, yeah, we're going to be canceling this game. And then I think last year it wasn't too bad. And I think home opener 2.0, the year where the first one got canceled, that as long as you were in the sun, you were all right. So I'm just hoping that there's going to be sunshine and a decent day and just fun to be watching Ohio State. Because Ohio State's going to be there because the Ohio State band is going to be performing, which is going to be totally awesome in itself. So I'm going to be getting some video and we can put that up also.
Awesome. Well, have a great time. I hope that the weather is more conducive to what you would expect, the home opener to be versus, kind of what the weather has been like. It just seems like we're in this holding pattern of 40s and gray, and I'm anxious for some consistent sunshine and, blue skies. It would be, nice.
Right now I'll take 40 and gray over the snow that just does not seem to want to quit for some reason this year.
Yeah.
That's another story for another day. But I mean, that's what we get for the last few years not having much snow. But it evens itself out in the end.
Yep.
All right. With that being said, we want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the Silver Bullets podcast on the Ozone Radio Network. Don't forget to please go and check out the other shows on the network, like the Buckeye Sloopcast, which we didn't even discuss today, the War on Shannon. They come out on Mondays. We've got the Sons of Schmidt with Michael, and Brandon. They come out. They're supposed to be every other Tuesday, so hopefully they're going to be coming out with a show here pretty soon. And then you have the Across the Field with Tony Gerdeman and Tom Orr that I produce, and that comes out on Wednesday. And either you're going to get a 2-hour show or you're going to get 2 shows for the price of one. So there's always a lot to talk about, especially with those guys, and a lot of information and stuff like that. And hopefully for next week's show, maybe we'll get some audio from the coaches and stuff, and we can play them on our show and, discuss certain things that are going on, like how the coaching staff working together with everything that's going on for the different positions and everything. It's like offensive, the coordinators and stuff like that. Chip, where can people find you at?
I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich. My last name is spelled Minnich. As I was saying, I have been writing for the Ozone under the Hayes and Cannon section, doing a spring football overview of different positions. So there will be an article coming out this coming Friday. There have been other position overviews that I'd be more than happy to get some feedback from our listeners in terms of if you agree, disagree, whatever it might be, about the concerns I have about some of the different positions that we talked about on the podcast tonight. And I also write for Athlon Sports.
Yes, definitely check this stuff out. You can find me on Twitter at ShannonCFB, and you can find our show on Twitter at SILVR Bullets Pod. You can find us on Facebook, Silver Bullets Podcast, and the Ozone, the Ozone Radio Network on Facebook and on Twitter. So with that, he's Chip Minnich. I'm Shannon Sommers. Thank you for listening, and go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
And Sunday, I can go back to making fun of Michigan.